How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's Q&A. So like any other week, if you want a chance on one of your questions being answered, make sure you drop a comment down below and I'll either answer that question right in that comment or in next week's Q&A or make a dedicated video if need be. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the first question of the week. And it is, when should you be replacing tires? Well, the number one reason will be if it does need replacement due to low tread. So if it's below like 430 seconds or so, you should definitely think about starting replacing those tires soon. Obviously at that level, you're going to want to be extra cautious when it's wet or snowy or especially icy out, and the tires with that little tread just don't work as well as a new tire. So that would be number one reason. And number two is if you have some sort of sidewall damage, whether it be some sort of a puncture or a piece of the tire missing or a nail or a screw that got too close to the sidewall, and you should probably be thinking about replacing that tire at that time, including a bubble or anything of that nature. So another reason would be if the tire is wearing uneven, you probably have a bigger issue going on, and you do have to isolate that issue before replacing that tire, or else it's just going to damage your brand new tires. Now, it could be as simple as just a car out of alignment, a worn bushing, or something of that nature, maybe a strut, something along those lines. But if the tire has some funky wear going on, make sure you get it professionally checked so you don't damage your brand new tires. And another reason being if the tire is just simply too old. Now, you can find the date on the tire. It's stamped on all tires, usually on one of the sides. So if it's on the inner side, you're not going to see it unless if you put it on a jack or a lift or something like that. But a lot of times we try to mount the date on the outside. And for example, if it says like 11/17, that'll be the 11th week of 2017 that tire was manufactured. And usually a good rule of thumb is about 6-7 years. And whether or not it still has great tread or not, the tire, they start to deteriorate due to the elements, and you should probably think about replacing those tires at that time. A lot of times you will see them starting to dry rot and things of that nature. So that would be a good indicator that that tire is or should be getting replaced sometime soon. So you should start thinking about factoring into your budget to get those tires replaced at that time. Now, obviously, there's people probably driving with tires that are way older than that, but those sometimes can cause blowouts and things of that nature. So just be aware and just go take a look at your tires and just see if any of those fall into your category and start thinking about replacing those tires. So hopefully that answers the question for you. Coolant flush, when should you be doing it, and hard to reach places, how do you do it? So I'm going to recommend changing the coolant about every 60,000 miles or so. Honda coolant does a great job and doesn't really deteriorate. Stay away from aftermarket coolants. Aftermarket coolants do seem to accelerate deterioration and corrosion. So stay away from those coolants. Use OEM, Honda, or Acura coolant only in these vehicles, or something very equivalent to it. So I would just stick to the Honda and Acura coolant, because a lot of times it'll say for Hondas or Acuras or for Asian vehicles or whatever the case may be, and it's not exactly made of the same exact components. So try to stick to those OEM fluids only. Again, 60,000 miles or so. If you go longer, again, they don't really deteriorate or anything of that nature and start to go bad or degrade and have any losses of function or anything. Although 60,000 miles is a general good rule of thumb. If you're waiting until you change your time belt at around 100K, most likely it'll be okay as long as it's OEM coolant. Now, if you have a vehicle that has hard to reach spots like some of these Pilots, some of these Civics, then you may just simply want to go and look for a YouTube video. If you have a specific vehicle, I will try to get some of these videos up. Or if it's something that you're not comfortable with, then you should probably get it professionally done. It's not something that costs a ton of money. And stay away from coolant flushes, especially on older vehicles. A lot of times when the plastics are brittle, parts are brittle already, all that pressure could cause more harm than good, and it could lead to a leaking heater core, thermostat housings, radiators, etc., some bursted hoses, something like that, which is stuff that you should be checking anyways. Anything rubber after X amount of years, you should be checking, whether it be belts or hoses or anything of that nature, after about 5 or 6 years, you should be squeezing them. Make sure you don't hear any crunching. If you hear any crunching, then obviously it is time to change whatever is that you're feeling for. If it's coolant hoses, do both of them. Don't just do one. Then in a couple of years, you have to do the other one. So just do both at that time and you'll be a-okay. So if it's a hard to reach spot, once again, get it professionally done. Also, when doing these coolant services, coolant flushes, whatever you want to call it, make sure you bleed them appropriately. I have a coolant funnel and I like to jack up the front end just a bit and like that, wait for the coolant fans to cycle twice, and that ensures that you have no coolant pockets, coolant air pockets in a system. So if the fans don't come on, then obviously you know something else is going on, but you probably would have figured that out already because the car most likely would have overheated. So again, jack the car up, coolant funnel, we'll fill the coolant funnel about halfway or so, let it do its thing. In the wintertime, it's going to take a long time for the fans to cycle twice. In the summertime, probably done in about 15 to 20 minutes. Make sure there are no air pockets in the system. And it's also a good chance to make sure your fans are both working properly. A lot of times I find failing coolant fans or, things of that nature when doing a coolant flush. A lot of times not something that we're looking for unless if we're waiting for the fans. And at that time, we do find a lot of failed fans on older vehicles. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So the next question is, what are some causes of a rough idle? Number one probably being a broken engine mount. It doesn't have to be completely broken. It could just be collapsed and it look fine, although it is resting on the mount itself, which is resting on the frame and not absorbing the vibrations as it should be. So we do see a lot of this. Usually the right front mount causes the most vibration. So something very simple to check. You just power brake it. Obviously, be extra cautious. You don't run anybody over and do that at your own risk. But press the brake pedal really hard, put it into drive or reverse, and just kind of give a gas and see if you see a lot of lifting action. That'll probably tell you that the mount is collapsed or torn at that time and should be replaced. Another one being that we do see a lot of dirty throttle bodies causing a low idle, which would have a rough condition or rough feeling condition. You simply just clean the throttle body and you relearn it. And 9 out of 10 times, that does seem to fix that as well. If you also have a vacuum leak of some sort, that could cause a rough idle. And if you have some tight valves, could also be lowering the idle, causing some rough idle at that point. So a couple different things that can happen here. It's really hard to exactly pinpoint all of them, but if you have a certain condition with a certain vehicle, I could try to help you be a little bit more specific, although those are just some of the things that can cause a rough idle. If it's stuck in VTEC on some of these older vehicles, which we have seen in the past, then that could cause a rough idle just to be from being on the aggressive cam lobe. I did find a couple of those on the K series a couple years back. So as we're phasing out of those engines, we're not really seeing those issues anymore. And then obviously a misfire could cause a rough idle, but you probably have a blinking check engine light at that point, which deactivates the cylinder to cause any further damage, but it will run like complete garbage at that point. So hopefully that answered the question for you. So what are some symptoms of failing brakes? So a lot of times we will see spongy brake pedals, and that will be either from seized slide pins or brake pads that aren't sliding smoothly in the retaining clips, and they're just stuck there, causing kind of the sort of same issue. So we do see that pretty often, and typically that's most of our failures. Now, sometimes from time to time, we will see a sticking caliper, and initially most of them aren't stuck when cold. After driving for a while, then they seem to tighten up and not release, and we get sort of vibrations. Obviously the car won't accelerate as smoothly and things of that nature. Now, if you have an extra hard brake pedal, it could be that your booster either has a vacuum leak or just not functioning at that point. So that could be one of those symptoms. Very, very rare that that scenario happens. If you have a brake pedal that is sinking fastly or slowly, sometimes it could be your master cylinder leaking, or you have some sort of external leak. So as these cars age, you should be looking at all the brake components, calipers, boots on the caliper pistons, boots on the slide pins, hoses, make sure the hoses don't have any bubbles on them. They're not twisted. Sometimes we do see them twisted, which also would give a stuck caliper type of feeling. So as the vehicles age, once again, you're going to want to take an extra look at your brake components, right? Your brakes are the most important thing on a vehicle. If you start and then you can't stop, that's obviously a big issue and not going to be a good day for a lot of people involved in that scenario. So hopefully that doesn't happen to anyone out there, but that would be some of the scenarios that we do see with failing brake components. And you could also have a ABS modulator go bad, causing a light, not causing the ABS to function properly, and stuff like that. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, last but not least, question of the week. And once again, if you want a chance that one of your questions is being answered, make sure you do drop a comment down below. So the question is how to get the appropriate temperature or the ideal temperature inside of your cabin. So we get this complaint a lot that when you start the vehicle, A, it takes too long to heat up or cool down, depending on the scenario. And then B, once it is there, you set it to, let's just use 70 as a number. And from there, you have to keep adjusting it. And you're comfortable at home at 70, but not 70 in your car. And a car is obviously a lot different from a home, but people have a hard time understanding that. So the cars do have a temperature sensor inside the HVAC box. And that temperature tries to, that sensor tries to get the cabin to that temperature. So that is the target temperature, but it is not a perfect world, and especially more so if you have multiple zones, that only complicates things. So it's just something that we have to deal with. And again, it's a target number. It's not necessarily going to reach that number. The sensor is in the box itself and not exactly around the vehicle itself, so or inside the cabin of a car. So again, it's not going to be exactly at that temperature. That's just going to be a target temperature. So once it sees that temperature in the air box, it might heat it more or cool it more depending on the scenario. And again, at the actual vents, it's going to always blow different than the target temperature. So people always try to say, and sometimes they come in with thermometers and stuff, and look, I said it's a 70 and it's blowing at 80, or I said it's 70 and it's blowing at 60. And just because it's set to that doesn't mean that's actually what it's blowing at. So in your house, if you set your temperature to 70 degrees, it's never going to blow at exactly 70 degrees, right? Your vents are always going to be blowing warmer in the winter or colder in the summer to try to get to that target 70 degree-ish area. So it's same thing with the car. And again, people have a hard time understanding this. I'm not sure why. And unfortunately, you're just going to have to kind of adjust it little by little, especially on longer trips, as the vehicle absorbs temperature from the outside, from the engine, whatever the case may be. So with that being said, hopefully I answered the question for you, and I catch everyone on the next one.